Hey everyone. So my name is Cairo Nevitt. I'm 28 years old and I don't look it, but I am. And my pronouns are he, him. I'm a professional actor, fitness model, activist, and spoken word artist. And I'm here to share with you my journey of transitioning from female to male. I'm going to talk about my personal experience, my personal journey, as well as my medical transition as well, to hope make it inspirational as well as educational. Thank you. So rock bottom became the solid foundation on which I rebuilt my life. So back in January 2016, I just turned 25 in the November. And by January, my health just suddenly took a turn for the worst. I was written off sick, I had vitamin D deficiency, I had low iron, I had a knee injury as well, and I'm a performer, and that's really not a good thing. So I was completely written off work, and I was very, very ill. Just before that had happened, in the December, I also do filmmaking, and I decided to do a sort of documentary about the LGBT community, and I wanted to include every single letter in that. And just kind of by chance, one of the days of filming, it just turned out that every single person that day was transgender. It was really strange how it happened. But I just couldn't help but feel like I learned so much from everybody's story, and the age range was really broad, but there were some key messages that resonated with me. So that kind of stuck with me. So in January I was literally housebound due to my knee injury, and I had to wait like about 3 months or so to get physiotherapy. And I'm a very proactive person, and to be stuck at home, literally bedbound at my lowest, and I couldn't even get upstairs for like a month. It just was awful, and I was young, and I was like, why is this all happening? What is going on? But it was the first time in my adult life that I was kind of forced to stay still. I've always kind of been a workaholic, but this time life made me be still, and I had to sort of listen to what was kind of going on in my head. And then I guess because I had met more transgender people, and also transgender men and transgender people from different backgrounds, it just sort of woke up something in me. So I started searching on YouTube, watching everyone's stories, watching all these videos, and it was like all these things were like connecting in my head, but it was really overwhelming, and I didn't really know what to do with all of that. And I think as well, my ex-girlfriend, she was working, she just got a promotion, so I was very isolated at home. Like I couldn't get out much. It was all like a lot to sort of deal with. And I just felt like a prisoner trapped in my room, and also dealing with my kind of gender identity. And it was really a lot to sort of take in. And I suppose in the very beginning, I really did struggle with coming to terms with accepting that I am transgender, just because it was very overwhelming, and I truly didn't know at that moment in time what my future would look like. Thank you. So yeah, over a course of some time, like I started to realize and accept that I was transgender in January, and then by like next month, it was kind of doing my head in, and I wanted to talk to my girlfriend at the time, and I came out to her. And also she had watched some of the videos that I was seeing, and she did see some similarities and was like, do you think that maybe you could be transgender? And I just sort of flat out denied it, just because I just couldn't open that door. I wasn't ready to. But then eventually we did have more conversations, and she was okay with it. She supported me, and I just remember feeling, I had a lot of dysphoria. I think because I didn't realize what was going on, it was like I was bombarded with everything. Just all the things that I'd suppressed were just like flooding forward, and I think I was just very overwhelmed, and there's a lot of waiting time. So she was just like, well, what can we do now? How can I help you now? She was very supportive, and the best thing that we could sort of do in the meantime was go shopping, and I got like a new wardrobe and got rid of all my old clothes, and I've got 3 younger sisters, so they took the best clothes, and then the rest I sort of gave to charity and just sort of got rid of everything. And sort of when I went shopping, I bought all these new clothes and got loads of new cool boxes. And obviously I live in a house like with just girls. So my mum was just like, one day just seeing like on the washing, there's all these boxes, and she's like, there isn't a man in the house. She just wasn't really sure like what was going on, and she could tell that I'd stopped wearing my hair out, I'd stopped wearing makeup. Some of it was due to being ill as well, but also I had basically secretly started transitioning. So then she sort of sat me down one day and had a conversation. She's like, what is going on? Like, are you depressed? I know you're depressed. Or like, what's going on? You don't make an effort anymore. You're letting yourself go. And there was some truth in the fact that I was depressed, but a lot of it was because I was still sort of waiting to do my physiotherapy. But I was quite frustrated and a bit defensive, to be honest, at the time. And I just sort of was a bit argumentative. And in that instance, it was more me, how I reacted. It turned into an argument. And I just sort of blurted out, you know what, it's because I'm transgender, that's why. And then I think it shocked her initially, but we just sort of left it, and she kind of went into her room, and we just sort of left it for like a day. And then the next morning, she came into my room, and she just was like, do you know what, I've had all night to think about this, and actually you were very different to all your sisters. And when you were young, you did have issues around gender, and I didn't always understand why at the time, but it's not actually that much of a surprise. I can remember, but I didn't want to take you to see anybody, because back then in the 90s, like, people were still, you know, saying it was like a mental health issue, and I didn't want that to be traumatic for you, so I didn't really say anything. So it was just a relief that she could be on side and be understanding. And I've always had a really good relationship with my mum, so that was something that a part of me knew that it would be okay, but it was different from when I came out years ago when I was 21 as a lesbian. It wasn't the same experience coming out as transgender. And like I said, I got 3 younger sisters, so when I had told them, like, there's always been sort of running jokes in the family. There's always sort of been like, because I've been muscly, oh, you got man legs. Like, they've always had, like, we just take the mickey out of each other. So again, even like my role to them as a sibling, like, it's always sort of been more like their older brother. And that's what my little sister said to me. She was like, you know, I've always thought of you as my older brother. And my sisters have been very, very supportive, and that means the world to me. And even like, basically my old middle name was like the traditional female name that every girl gets, the oldest girl in our family gets. And obviously when I changed my new name, my sister, who's really been basically the big sister, she has then taken my old name, so she still actually has kept the tradition going. So it's like everything's kind of worked out quite nice in that sense. So eventually, so obviously things was going well in terms of the support that I had at home and within my family. And so like the next step, I thought, okay, right, I want to decide that I do want to transition. It was a big decision to make, and I was like, okay, well, how do I start medically transitioning? So on the 31st of March, I went in to see my local GP, went to see my doctor. And on the list of like doctors, there wasn't like my usual doctors that I'd been talking to, because I was quite ill at the time. I was regularly always in the doctors. None of them were in, but I decided in my head that today needs to be the day. I just can't hold this secret any longer. So the GP that I went was the head of the surgery, and he really didn't take me seriously. He was just trying to put it all down to me sort of being depressed, not realizing that it was in correlation to that. He also said to me that, you know, transgender is sort of trending at the moment, and sort of looked to me as if I was crazy, and sort of implied, like, why would you want to do that? Like, why would you do that to yourself? And obviously, and he literally, you know, as it says up there, he literally told me, people who transition aren't happier. And you've got to remember, at the time I had anxiety and my confidence took a huge knock, so it was hard for me to be assertive as I usually would have been, because I was in a harder time. But I did remember the charity work that I'd done in the past, and I just sort of decided to question him further and challenge him a little bit, and to be like, well, that's your opinion, like, you can't just, that's not a fact, that's your opinion. Or, you know, if you're going to send me to counsel and send me to the right place, at least that they deal with people that are transgender, or at least then they can give me counselling, but then they can help me to transition. So I was sort of almost having like a miniature argument in the appointment. Eventually, he sort of came around to the idea of sending me to the gender clinic, but before he pressed the button, he was like, but it's just to talk, right? It's just to talk. And I was thinking, like, well, what difference does it make if I say I'm going to talk to them, but then I'm going to transition? Does that mean you're going to not press that button? And does that mean you're going to then put my life on hold? And really, is that your decision to make? So eventually, I just sort of humoured him, because I could see where this was going. And I was like, yes, it's just to talk. So I left the surgery feeling, I don't know, a mixture of feelings. A part of me felt proud of myself for daring to speak up in such a time that I was very vulnerable. But another part of me felt really disheartened. I was disheartened by his reaction. You know, it was like the first time probably in public that I dared to come out as transgender, and that was the response that I was faced with. And most people, that would have reverted them back, and then it would have taken them even longer to even step back into that surgery and get the help that they need. Also, just a really random coincidence. That day that I went into the clinic, I didn't realize till later in the evening, but that was Transgender Day of Visibility. And that is why it might have been trending that particular day. It's just like the ignorance is just unreal, but also for me, I took it as a sign almost, as if to say, yeah, this is what you're supposed to be doing, and you just have to believe and maybe educate people in the process or to get them to catch up. I was also disheartened when I found out how long the current waiting times are. You know, it says to be about 12 months to 15 months, but actually when people are really honest, it's like, hey, maybe it's 2 years for your first ever appointment to even be seen. That's not to start any treatments or anything. And then what are you supposed to do in the meantime? You don't really get any support. You're just sort of left, like, you know, they don't even answer your calls or anything. It's crazy. So next one, please. Yeah, so I was sort of left in this limbo, as well as sort of learning about my gender identity. And like I said, all these things that I'd suppressed for 25 years, it was just like, it just bombarded me. You know, my confidence level was like on the floor. The way that I felt in relation to my body, I just was so uncomfortable. I've never felt so uncomfortable in my whole life in my own skin. And I had so much anxiety because I hadn't come out to anyone else yet. It had just been to my very, very nearest and dearest, and then I had the bad experiences sort of with that particular GP. And I was really worried about what my future would look like. I didn't know if it would mean I'd work again. Also, I'd worked previously as an actress and a female model, and I was just like, well, is that my career over? At the time, I was in a lesbian relationship as well, so I was worried about that. And I was worried about how long it would take, could I even afford it? All these thoughts that you're bombarded with when you decide to sort of transition. Like, it's a lot to sort of take in. And it just hit me, like dysphoria just hit me like a ton of pop bricks. And I had spent about, the gap between telling my loved ones and telling everybody was like 6 months. And in between that time, literally, like, my anxiety levels went through the roof. My heart rate literally was changing rhythm. I would just, I don't know, even like that they took seriously. And they was like, oh, why is your pulse going? I can't remember the rates, I don't know. But it was just way too high, and they even sent me to get like my heart checked. And that wasn't because I have a heart condition, that was because of the anxiety that I was feeling of sort of living a double life, of not being honest. And also by that point, my knee injury was all healed up. I finished my physio, so really it wasn't any reason why I couldn't go back out there and socialise. But because I'd sort of begun transitioning, it was more the social anxiety around it that kind of was my barrier. But thankfully, I basically went on holiday, and sort of at the end of the holiday, I was like, right, when I come back, I need to come out, I need to tell people this. And I was going to make like a video, but in those videos, I looked really not confident. It was almost like I was asking for people's permission, and that's not what it was about. Thank you. So yeah, so in the end, I was like, right, you know what, I'm just going to take this leap. I'm going to come out to everyone on Facebook. I've got like over 1,000 or so people that know me. I just know so many people, and the more that number goes up, the more you start to worry about how people react. But I just decided, you know what, for my own self and my own literal mental health and physical health, I need to just do this. So I wrote this status on Facebook. This is making me so sad and so anxious, but I can't keep pretending. I'm just going to be honest and say, I am transgender. I've decided to take a break from acting to focus on my transition. I no longer wish to be addressed as Cairo or as she or as her. 2016 has been a year of self-discovery and challenges, but through the struggles, I am wiser. By slowing down, I can understand things that I've never given the time to. I can't stress how important it is that I do this. Since accepting this, my anxiety levels have gone through the roof. I have been worried about everything, and it's not a way I want to live, powered or paralyzed by fear. I choose to live with courage, pride, and dignity. I realized that hiding this was probably the worst thing I could do, because despite how people judge, being transgender is not a choice. I choose life. I choose happiness. I want to live as my true self. Surely that has to be a beautiful thing. I am Cairo Leo Nevitt. Embrace it. And then I just put hashtag no filter, hashtag positive vibes only, hashtag trans pride. And when I sent this message, I was just like, oh my God. It was like when you fancy someone and you want to send them a text and you're worried how they'll respond, but times 1,000. So I put the status up and I kind of went in my garden. I didn't check my phone for like 2 or 3 hours because I needed to know that this was for myself. It didn't matter about the response of others, even if it would in the long term affect me, but in this moment it was about empowering myself. And I got myself in like a positive frame of mind, and then I came back. And I was so surprised. I had like over 200 likes, I had like 100 messages, my phone was like going off, and everyone, like 99%, thankfully, were so supportive, and I just was flooded with love and support, and it literally made me cry because I was so afraid. And I'd been carrying this weight on my shoulders, and actually, like, thankfully, I spent years kind of picking the weeds and keeping the flowers. So when I did have this big thing that I needed to share with people, I had a good response from people, and that I'm so grateful for that. So it's just an example of how people can be better. Like, it doesn't take much to send somebody a nice message. Thank you. Did you always know? It's kind of a big thing that kind of comes up a lot. And I came out when I was 25. And a lot of people say that's kind of too old, and it's just, you know, there's all these debates about being too young. It's like there isn't a set age of knowing who you are. And you have to understand that it wasn't until I was like 24 that I ever saw a transgender man for the first time in real life, or even in pictures. And I just didn't have the access to the information, where now it's changing with kind of social media and different documentaries and people campaigning. It's a different time than it was kind of even just 28 years ago, and even you can imagine what it's like 50, 60 years before that. You know, looking back, there's definitely signs. You know, it's always easy to look back in hindsight, you know. I remember, you know, just my self-portrait was a boy, and I think as I got older, I just, you know, you start to self-filter based on like how you socialize and the pressure that people put upon you. Then I draw like a little ponytail on the end. I think it's just weird. Like, I had to really go on a really deep journey of soul searching, because when you come out as transgender, like, you're bombarded with all these questions, because you kind of have to, it's almost as if you need to get other people to believe you, especially when you're medically transitioning. And just everyone's journey is different, and just to be open-minded of that. I remember where, I think, looking back, you remember funny things, and I think, I remember basically I went to a film premiere once, and I remember wearing a suit for the first time. And I remember feeling so smug and like I cheated the whole system. I didn't have to go in a dress and horrible heels. And I just felt so happy that I could just be comfortable in who I was. And even though it's like a tiny little thing, it just made me be so happy. And even, I think I wore heels just for the pictures, but afterwards they were done. I had my Primark plimsolls and happy as, you know, anything. And it's just like little moments like that of just feeling comfortable in my skin. And I think where people assume, like, because of what I looked like in the past, I was like, oh, you're so pretty, you're so this, you're so that, like, you should do this, you should do that. And there's like this big social pressure that we put upon each other. And even like some of my friends now have come up to me like, John, I'm sorry for forcing you to wear that dress when we were all going out and you really didn't want to, or like, just, I don't know, it's just trying to force people into boxes that they don't fit into. Thank you. So you guys in this room seem pretty up to date with how things are, but I just sort of made it more general just in case you're not. But there's 3 different elements of transitioning, and I feel like people forget this. I think whenever I saw a documentary, they always focus on the surgeries, and they don't really think about the emotional changes that you've gone through when you're socializing. And that's just something to bear in mind, or the way that you interact with people really makes a big difference. You know, like, it's a lot. You're changing your whole life, and when people are resistant, then that creates problems. But yeah, like, this is just, you know, if you want to see it socially, medically, and legally. And you know, I was so happy, like, last year when I got my passport back. It was just so nice to hold my passport and be like, this is a solid document that people, this is the government, and people just, it was just having that validation. And I think when you're transgender, like, you're up against so many things, and people almost invalidate who you are on a constant basis, and it just happens too many times. So in the end, I was left in limbo for about 6 to 7 months, and I had spoken to my other GPs, and they did tell me that the GP that wasn't so nice, he sent my referral form, and they were chasing him to do that. But also, due to the backlog in waiting times, I know you don't really always hear anything. So I was just trying to call the clinic, nothing was happening. And in the end, I just was very frustrated, and I was just very down. I was like, you know what, it's not, like, there's so many reasons why I just need progress, and I need it to happen sooner to get back into my career, and, you know, just everything. So in the end, because I was sort of left in limbo with no sort of communication, even when I was chasing people, I decided that I didn't really have no choice, even though I couldn't really afford it at the time, but I just sort of had to go private. So I went to gender care, and they were really kind of supportive, and, you know, they helped me a lot, but it was frustrating that I sort of had to do that rather than stay on the NHS pathway. And just, it was just, I think the difference, forget like private versus NHS, but the difference I experienced in the way that I was treated is that I was just taken seriously. And that was a really nice feeling, because sometimes people almost make you feel like you're the crazy one, and that's not right or acceptable. And I know that to transition, you kind of get asked a lot of questions, and that's sort of part of the process. But for once, it didn't feel like an interrogation. I didn't feel like I did something wrong, and I'm sitting in a police cell being grilled about why this, why that, why this. It was just with respect. So that's something for your practice that it would be good to kind of bear in mind. And a few days before I went to my first private consultation, I got a letter, and it basically said that the gender clinic had been chasing my GP for 1 year, and because they didn't get any response from him, I was then discharged officially from the NHS pathways. And it was a very hard letter to read, because I couldn't help but think, obviously I just intuitively just went, I need to do something different, I need to do a different pathway. But if I'd have been kept waiting for a year and no one even communicated with me, and then I get that letter and I feel like other people can be more vulnerable, and I just felt that I could just send somebody over the edge, and it's not acceptable. And yeah, like, it was very triggering and very disturbing to get that letter. Obviously, thankfully, I already decided to act differently, but that's not the point. Transgender people should not be treated like that on the NHS. So yeah, so I did have my consultation, and I was finally got the go-ahead. My notes were changed, got diagnosed with gender dysphoria, but also discussed what path I would like to take, and I wanted to start hormones. So something to add, I'm afraid of needles. Great, huh? All the blood work you have to do even before you start testosterone, then you have to get a shot every 30 days. In my case now it's 21 days. So, you know, I do get anxiety about it sometimes, not so much now, but in the beginning I did. So this is my face before the shot. I'm just like, oh my God, I can't do this. And the actual injection, it does hurt. And then afterwards, like, I am very happy. It's one of those, like, things that you just deal with. You know, you got to feel the fear and do it anyway. It's for the greater good. Since starting testosterone, I have gone through a number of changes. And I just feel like sometimes people don't understand just how life-changing the hormone treatment can be, and why people get excited about it, or why they sort of need it. And really, if there could be ways of making that process quicker, then, you know, that would be even better as well. But sort of going through testosterone, I'll actually show you the next slide actually. one of the things, is that back or forward? Did we go past one? Yeah, voice change. Can you play the video? If it works, I don't know. I'm only going to play like a little bit just so you can hear my voice, how it was. Is it not working? Okay, well I can't show you. That's fine, it doesn't matter. But my voice has significantly dropped. I remember sort of getting back into acting, and I was in a show, and it was the first time like in forever that I had to sing, and then my voice started breaking during that particular show. And the musical director was no longer with us anymore. So that was fun and interesting. But you know, with these changes, I've become so much more confident. My face has completely changed, like my jawline has changed. But and like, you know, I'm starting to, basically it's kickstarted male puberty, and I'm growing facial hair, getting spots, you know, all that fun stuff that happens at puberty. And I've got to go for it twice, woohoo! But I think more than just the physical changes, something to take note is the emotional changes, the increase in my confidence since being able to start testosterone. I think that is, you know, I can't even put to words that feeling. It makes me feel so good. And I remember, you know, at my lowest point being super dysphoric, and I just didn't even want to look in the mirror. I didn't want to be, you know, pictures. I didn't want to take no selfies. I didn't want to do nothing. I didn't really even want to be seen. And it's sort of given me the courage and the confidence to be happy with who I am and comfortable in my own skin. And I think it's just as a side note, I think when people ask, like, why am I transgender, or like, when people are very resistant and they make it a big deal, I kind of look at it like, I just sort of see it as like a vitamin deficiency, you know, because when I was in my mum's womb, if I didn't get that right amount of testosterone at that right specific moment, like, that's kind of all it was, or where it started. And it's sort of like when I had a vitamin D deficiency, like, as soon as I realized what the problem was and I got the right dose, like, everything quickly became better. So it's just another side for something to bear in mind. Also, people that transition, sorry, the next slide. Thank you. So in my journey, like, a lot has changed physically. My body has changed a lot. And I have had to work really hard in accepting myself, and I've learned to be really body positive, or like, what can you do in the meantime? So I've been like, fitness has been a really key element to sort of my growth physically and mentally, and just sort of when I'm dealing with dysphoria and being distressed. This is for a separate sort of campaign, that image in there, but it took a lot to do. But like, I wouldn't have done that like 2 years ago because of dysphoria. I'm still pre-op and I'm waiting to have top surgery. But just because I guess a lot of people don't see what transgender bodies look like, and obviously this is just one type, that I'm not speaking on behalf of every single person. We all come in different shapes and sizes, but for me, fitness has been very beneficial. It's been the one thing that has kept me grounded when some of my life has been crazy. And just, you know, I'm also going to be training to be a personal trainer in this year, so it's been really positive, and I hope to sort of maybe work with LGBT people, and particularly transgender people as well, because I just think mentally as well, just that you can just sort of de-stress. But yeah, so I've sort of made it my mission in the meantime of waiting to be proactive and to be positive and sort of doing the best that I can. Thank you. Yeah, so talking about top surgery. So because I've gone private, I basically have to pay for top surgery myself now, which is going to cost me about £7,000. Which I've never needed anywhere near that amount of money in my whole entire life. But, you know, it's what it is, unfortunately. But I have been lucky enough I applied for some funding I'm going to be going to America to get top surgery done. I don't have a date yet because it's still fundraising the final bits, but I applied through this, for this grant by a charity called Point of Pride, and I've been very blessed and very fortunate that I was granted $2,500, the first ever international person to receive that grant as well. Some of that is thanks to the charity stuff that I do, and just I got the references that people, so my friends, my family, people I've worked with, they wrote in just so many beautiful messages, and I do really think my application stood out because of the support. And I think that's just something I want you guys to bear in mind, like the support. Just little things can make a really big difference. Also at the beginning of this year, I joined a gym and I had a personal trainer, and this is my gym. We all ran and did Tough Mudder, the full Tough Mudder, 10 miles, 25 obstacles. It was horrendous. It was horrendous. I didn't even practice running. I wasn't really allowed to do much cardio because I lose weight really quickly, so I couldn't really practice too much cardio. And then I got there and you just see like the scale of the hills and you're like, oh my God, getting out of this place, and that's just the car park. You haven't even got to the starting point yet. But it really pushed me out of my comfort zone, and I think throughout my whole transition, I've had to grow in so many ways, and it has made me evolve, and like it also can be a positive thing. Or not everyone gets the second chance in life to start again, but I've sort of used my transition to sort of see it in that way, to be the best version of myself that I can possibly be. And my gym came with me, and they all supported me, and we raised some money. I still have about £1,500 to go, but that big weight of the amount of money just gets smaller, and one day it'll be, raised hopefully. So good practice versus bad practice. So I'll sort of speak about my personal experiences. Basically, I don't do my shot myself. I choose to go into the GP and get a nurse to do it to help me. So basically, like over this time, me and my nurses have built a really good relationship, and I also want to say how much that has relieved me from having anxiety, or just how much confidence that has given me. We've actually got a nice relationship going, and that's something that in the beginning I thought maybe it wouldn't be possible because how people judge. And they do ask me questions, but it just always seems friendly, and it can be general, like we've built that kind of rapport. But sometimes, the nurses changed, and I've had also some encounters with other nurses who have been a bit much, like with their inappropriate questions. I had one nurse, I'm very open, so I don't usually, people go, oh, do you mind if I ask you a question? I'm like, okay, cool. And she was just asking me all these really random questions. She was like, but what if you fall in love? And I was like, okay, so what about that? Like, okay, so where's this going? Like, what? And then the one that got me the most, she was like, what if you meet a nice man? And I was like, I am the nice man. Like, what are you talking about? And it just, I don't know, I just think all of her assumptions were just so out of date and wrong, and it just was like, I just feel like there's definitely a lot of training that needs to go in to the NHS and when dealing with transgender patients. These are just some definitions. I'm not going to read them out, but if any, just some myths around being transgender. I think like there's all these kind of scandalous things in the media, and they're always trying to make it out like they're just trying to scandalize people. And basically, like it is very rare that people detransition. I know people love to hone in on those stories, but they are a very, very tiny minority. But I don't like when people, like I said, you always have to prove yourself, and that's not. And also, being transgender is no longer classed as a mental illness as well, because I feel like there's a quote here. We've historically misclassified a lot of conditions in medicine because of the combination of stigma, fear, and misunderstanding. So hopefully we can work on changing those stigmas and just those kind of bad connotations. And basically life now, to summarize, this is me and my mom. I love her, she's my hero for so many different reasons. And this is me on Muscle and Fitness. I didn't ever think that this was going to happen. Go into the gym 5 months later, be in Muscle and Fitness. But I just think the most important thing that I kind of message I want to leave people with is anybody can thrive with a good network of support. Like, I don't think it's by chance that I've been able to be successful. I've had to be able to even stand up here and talk to you about my journey. Like, I do have a really solid foundation of people in work. Some things I've had to negotiate, and it's been like a back and forth conversation. But people have been positive, and I think there's this big kind of, I'm not saying, I do a lot of different charity work, and there's very real dangers towards transgender people. There is very, the harassment that happens. But also I just think I'm kind of tired of people sort of being programmed to say that sort of when you're transgender, all you're going to do is have conflict, or you can't be successful, you can't do this. And actually, it can also, I found personally, it can be quite empowering, you know. And my freedom and well-being is more important than the opinions of others. And coming out as transgender was honestly one of the scariest things I've ever done, but also the most rewarding. I'm happy inside out, I'm comfortable in my own skin, and to me, that is priceless. I choose to live my life based on love and not fear. That's a really big mantra I live by, because on the other side of fear is paradise. Thank you.